Well, guys, this is not going to be a fun video to make, but one that is appropriate given the current circumstances. My original plan was Friday night I was going to make a big Lucha Underground centric video talking about part one of Ultima Lucha, which happened on Wednesday. I talk about how much I really enjoyed it, and then preview part two, the season finale, coming up next Wednesday. That was the big plan I had, but then the news, the really bad news broke, and I was like, well, I don't really feel like making that video now for obvious reasons. So yeah, the Ultima Lucha preview video will probably come up sometime next week, like Monday, Tuesday, maybe Wednesday morning, because I actually have off of work on Wednesday, so I'll have time to make a video during the morning. But yeah, obviously, what I wanted to talk about in this video was the unfortunate passing of Roddy Piper, a wrestling legend if there ever was one. Roddy is undoubtedly that. One of the most famous personalities, personas, characters in the history of wrestling, and it's really getting to be quite tragic. If you know, I mean, it's already tragic, but you know, when I think of all the wrestlers I watched as a kid and the guys that I grew up loving and appreciating, and the great memorable characters that I just adored watching in my youth, I mean, the list of guys that I watched as a kid, I mean, that list is getting smaller and smaller because they're just, you know, they're just not living that long. I mean, Roddy was only 61. That's not that old, and yeah, we're losing way too many legends. I mean, I think of all the guys: Randy Savage, Ultimate Warrior, obviously, Roddy Piper, Dusty Rhodes. God, I still haven't gotten over Dusty. That's the other thing. It's like I was not ready to lose Piper. It was just, and I didn't know that he was in that. I mean, I knew he wasn't a spring chicken, but I knew that I didn't know that his health had declined to the point that he could die of cardiac arrest. So it's very unfortunate. It's really sad, and yeah, it's a tough one to deal with because, like I said, Piper was one of the most memorable personalities in the history of wrestling, and that's what I wanted to talk about in this video. Just talk about the good times of Roddy Piper and what I remember about him, what I loved about him, and why I appreciated him so much. First and foremost, I often make the argument in wrestling. It's not about what moves you do; it's how you use what you can do, and whether or not you can project a personality that can connect with an audience. And Roddy Piper, to me, is the epitome of that. And I often cite him as an example of, you know, you don't have to have the flashiest moveset. You don't have to dive off the top rope and do all sorts of crazy things to get the crowd to like you. It's all you got to do is be able to connect. The moves are tools to do that, but you know, if you have a personality that's engaging and interesting and fun to watch, then you know your matches just kind of trail along for the ride, and the fans will go along with you no matter what. And Roddy was that to a T because if you watch his matches, he didn't do much. He was just a punch and kick type of guy. He'd throw sleeper hold, couple suplexes, very basic in what he would do. But because he was such a strong character, and because you cared about him so much, whether he was the villain or the hero, it didn't matter. You were usually invested in whatever he did. His matches would matter, and they were major attractions on the show, and those are the matches that you didn't want to go to the bathroom and miss because Roddy Piper was on, and he was a big deal. So, yeah, Roddy, to me, you know, got the most out of the least, and had many memorable feuds, segments, matches, whatever. I mean, when I was doing my Showcasing the Immortals video series a few years ago, I put him down as one of the major important icons in WrestleMania's history. He was one of the guys that helped establish WrestleMania and make it into what it is today. I mean, he was the main villain of the first main event program that built WrestleMania, and participated in the first WrestleMania main event. Without Piper, and without that war to settle the score match that he had with Hogan to set up the WrestleMania main event, you don't have WrestleMania. You need, and you know, it's that old saying that a hero's only as strong as the villain that he has to overcome. And without Piper, that whole program doesn't work. You needed Piper. He was arguably the most important part of that whole thing. that connects everything together. It gives the good guys a drive. It gives Hogan a reason to get Mr. T as his partner. You establish a strong villain, and then everything else just kind of trails along and connect. The dots connect and everything, and the stars align, and you get great moments like what you got at WrestleMania. Um, Obviously, Piper was just a great character in the time of wrestling. So many great moments, and he perfected the interview segment. I mean, he's the one that popularized it with Piper's Pit and made it a worthwhile part of the show. And so many great moments and big things that they did. The most famous is probably the coconut incident where he hit Jimmy Snuka with the coconut, which was great. My personal favorite, and it was to set up a match that Piper was not a part of, was when Andre the Giant turned heel on Hulk Hogan to set up the main event for WrestleMania 3. The fact that it was on Piper's Pit made the setup seem even bigger, and Piper's reactions to everything made it seem bigger than or probably bigger than it would have otherwise if they did it in some other format. It's just Piper just added the right flavor to it. Like when he looked down at Hogan and said, "You're bleeding," because his chest was bleeding when Andre ripped the shirt off. It was just one of those great things that just made a great moment even better. Piper's Pit was fantastic, and you look at some of the stuff he did in those years. He was a major, important part of the rock and wrestling era. The stuff he did with Cyndi Lauper and Lou Albano, the stuff he did with Mr. T. I'm actually one of the few people that liked the boxing match at WrestleMania 2, and the main reason I like it, and the main reason I defend that match, is because I loved Roddy Piper in it. I thought he was great. Doing the bits where he's like picks up the stool and throws it at T during the end around break, and the way he acted throughout the entire thing, and the way he got himself disqualified at the end. I don't know. I enjoyed it because I just loved Piper's character so much. I thought he made the thing work. But that's just me. Apparently, I'm the only one that likes that match. But I think his match with Adrian Adonis at WrestleMania 3 is massively underrated. I thought it was one of the major highlights of the show. That's the program that set it up was fantastic, and those are some of the best things they ever did with Piper's Pit. I remember the segment where Piper took the baseball bat and destroyed the set of the flower shop. And I think that's one of the best things Roddy Piper was ever a part of. And they got a lot of great stuff out of that. And I think it's one of the better feuds that Roddy was in. And he doesn't really... That one never comes up when Roddy's career is talked about. But it's one of the ones that I remember the most. Obviously, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the famous dog collar matches that he had with Greg Valentine. Namely the one at Starrcade 83. Again, it's one of those early examples of wrestling brutality and hardcore wrestling that really kind of set the bar for that type of thing. And yeah, it is a really brutal and violent match to watch. And even back then, it's just like, man, there's stuff in there that makes you cringe. And it just seemed very barbaric and insane to do a match like that. And, we live in a day and age where the WWE is so kind of sterile. I mean, I know everybody makes fun of it for being PG, but it's very kind of glossy and clean and, very kind of sterile in a way. It kind of reminds me of the Star Wars prequels, where the Star Wars prequels, they look too clean, it looks too too rehearsed, it almost looks too good, and that's the problem with it. Where, you look at matches like Piper and Valentine and some of the old NWA stuff, and it's very roughneck, very dirty looking, very roughneck, and I think Cornette talked about this when he said that his favorite WWF match of all time was Bret and Austin at WrestleMania 13, because it did look like a very NWA-esque match. It wasn't clean, crisp, and refined. It was very dirty, down-to-earth, very real, brutal, stiff-looking wrestling. And I think Roddy and Valentine in that chain match is cut from that very same cloth. It's one of those benchmark matches that will stand the test of time and will go down as one of the most memorable matches of its kind. Piper is just such a great star in the '80s, and obviously I have to mention his role in the movie They Live, which is it's a good movie. I really enjoy it, but mainly because of Piper and Keith David. I love those guys so much. And Piper was just so great and so quotable. I mean, that whole bit. I've come to kick ass and chew bubblegum, and I'm all out of bubblegum. I mean, that's such a great thing. I wish Piper had a more successful acting career because I think he was really good at it. And he's such a great personality. You'd think, he'd have movie roles just thrown his way left and right. But, that one movie definitely, I think, one of the best examples of utilizing a wrestler in a movie. Which, since the dawn of The Rock, going into a Hollywood career, wrestlers have gotten better roles in movies. Rock has become, I think, a really good actor. But back then, it didn't happen too often. Every now and then, you get like a bit part for somebody, like Professor Toru Tanaka was in Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Things like that. So, but Piper was a leading man in a movie from John Carpenter, who's an acclaimed director. Halloween and horror, other horror movies like that. But so for him to get that part and to do as well as he did, I mean, that's a pretty big feather in his cap. And even when he transitioned into doing commentary for the WWF, I thought he was great at it because he would be like, I would try to imagine Piper doing commentary today with Vince yelling at his headset and him just deliberately fucking with Vince and saying, no, I'm not going to do that. I will always remember the main event to SummerSlam 1990 where Roddy Piper did nothing but shit on the Ultimate Warrior the entire time. And I just thought it was so funny that there's one guy in the company who's not going to bend over and kiss Ultimate Warrior's ass and say that he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And that's very realistic. There was another one, Tony Atlas, when he debuted as Saba Simba. I mean, go look for it. It's hilarious. Piper's on commentary, and he says, "That's not Saba Simba, that's Tony Atlas." And it's like, well, you killed that gimmick, Roddy. But, there was a sense that Roddy wasn't bullshitting. He was just thinking what a lot of us were thinking, quite honestly. I thought it was very entertaining at the booth. And he also knew how to make matches and storylines feel very important and make them feel bigger. One of my favorite feuds from my childhood was Virgil versus DiBiase in '91, and which ultimately culminated with that, I think, fantastic match that they had at SummerSlam '91. And one of the major selling points of that feud was Roddy Piper's involvement because Virgil, let's face it, not much of a talker. So you had Piper to talk for him and to be his friend and his mentor and everything. And I thought he added an extra layer to the whole thing that made it work even better. And he was doing commentary for the SummerSlam match, and he got so emotionally into that match that it was impossible not to get sucked into it right along with him. He was so good at putting the whole story over and, cheering for Virgil and, getting angry at DiBiase and everything. And DiBiase, of course, was such a great heel. And I've said it before, my favorite three-man team in the history of the business was Monsoon, Piper, and Heenan at SummerSlam '91. I thought they were entertaining. I thought they were funny. I thought they knew how to make the matches seem important. They put over the right things. It was just very fun to listen to. And as far as I know, they only called the one show together, which is unfortunate because I could have listened to those three banter back and forth all the time. But I loved Roddy at the booth. I mean, he was one of those. He was a jack of all trades. He could almost do it all. Really, it was really quite remarkable. He could be a manager, he could be a commentator, he could be an authority figure, he could be an interviewer, he could be a wrestler. He's such a great personality that he could do it all. And no one's been able to quite do the whole Scotsman gimmick or eccentric foreigner gimmick, I guess, as well as he could. I mean, you've seen like the Highlanders when they came in and they wore the kilts, and they couldn't get it over the same way Roddy could. There was just something like Roddy with the kilt and the bagpipes. That's his look, and it's his character, it's his persona, and he was so good at making all that work. And I think my favorite Roddy Piper match of all time, if I'm going back to his in-ring work, my favorite match he ever had was the Intercontinental title match he had with Bret Hart at WrestleMania 8. And it's one of those matches where I went into the match, and this is coming from the point of view of a 7-year-old kid. I went into that match cheering for Roddy because as a kid I liked Roddy so much. And by the end of it, I was cheering for Bret. So that match not only was a great back and forth, technically sound match, not only did it have drama and everything, but it did what it was supposed to do, and it got me to accept Bret Hart as a top wrestler and get me to really get behind him. and Roddy Piper made that work and made Brett look like $1,000,000, and they had one hell of a match, I thought, and it was. Still say one of the all-time great Intercontinental title matches, and probably one of the most underappreciated gems in WrestleMania's history. It doesn't come up in conversation all that much, but it's one of my favorites. So, yeah, if I had to pick a favorite Roddy Piper match, it'd be that one. But he had a few other ones too. Like I remember. And this is why I miss the Coliseum video days, because back in the Coliseum video days, you would get these VHSs that had matches you had never seen before, and taped from the Garden or taped at the Boston Garden or in Canada or whatever, and just these matches that you never saw on TV, and you would get them on video, and it was a really cool concept. I wish you'd get something like that on the network, or even I even thought TNA should start like selling DVDs of their house shows or something, just to kind of give us different material that we're not seeing on TV. But it's one of those things that unfortunately went the way of the dinosaur. But I remember one match Piper had on one of the Coliseum videotapings was a steel cage match with Rick Rude. I thought was terrific. I thought it was a great match. Just great stuff. And yeah. And again, Piper could do that type of thing without doing too much. He knew how to get himself over, how to tell the right story, and how to make everything work. And when he was in his prime, Piper was damn good. And probably the last really good Roddy Piper match, because most of his WCW stuff wasn't very good, but probably the last really good match he had was the Hollywood Backlot Brawl with Goldust, which wasn't really a match. It was just kind of this wild thing that they put together for WrestleMania, and it was really insane and entertaining and fun to watch. I could have done without the O.J. Simpson White Bronco, but other than that, I thought it was very entertaining and another great showcase for Roddy Piper's character. But yeah, I mean, Piper created so many great moments and so many great memories and so many great matches, and the wrestling world lost another legend, and it's very sad and it's a shame. But just wanted to come on here and pay my respects to Roddy Piper, and obviously my thoughts and prayers go out to his family and friends during this very hard time. I know he had a lot of people in wrestling that really liked him. I know that Ric Flair and him were really good friends, and I know that Rick's probably not taking it too well, and I know he was real close with the Hart family too, and that's another thing. It's hard, especially for such a memorable, one-of-a-kind character as Roddy Piper. You don't want to. That's a legend you want to keep around, And it's all very sad, and unfortunately, in the world of wrestling us fans, we go through this way too much. It's really unfortunate, but just wanted to come on here, pay my respects to Roddy Piper, one of the guys that made me a wrestling fan, one of the earliest personalities that I really latched onto as a character, and really made me appreciate the art form of professional wrestling. So thank you for all the good memories, Roddy. You will be missed, and it's very sad, but hopefully my next video will be a little bit on the happier side. Like I said, I'm going to talk about Ultima Lucha. I'm getting caught up on the New Japan G1 Climax as well. Nakamura's unfortunate injury might have thrown a monkey wrench into things, but we'll see how it all plays out. But I'll be back with something a little bit happier, a little bit more, a little bit less morose, we shall say. But that's all I have for you now. Hope you all enjoy your weekend, and I will see you all later.